I was asked to elaborate on the evil and evil around us. And I wanted to describe what's going on around us. And Michal already said that. So I will focus on the reasons for the evil. Maybe I will be less pessimistic than you might expect, but that's inherent for myself, and you may disagree with me. Nevertheless, maybe it's good not to be more pessimistic than need be. It's true that world's in the worst condition since the Second World War. Not only we have very many displaced people, we have very many war conflicts, everything's volatile, but we lost direction, we lost the vision, we lost our optimism. We do not know what's going to happen next. And the developed world is anxious about future development. There are various possibilities, and one root cause of our anxiety is the economic crisis 10 years ago, which took us by surprise. That it was the incapacity of the European Union to integrate and speak in one voice. I will get to all those reasons, but in general, I don't think that the evil in ourselves and around us nominally grows. I don't think that the world and people are worse than before. The circumstances have changed. The environment has changed. There is a way for the easy prescriptions. There's too much of pragmatism and cynicism over values like humanism, solidarity, and human rights. Let's have a look into the history. World used to be much worse place in the second half of the past century. Africa, so many dictators established by the US or by Moscow under one condition: join us and then do whatever you want to do. They had concubines, they tasted human blood and human flesh. There were tons of such dictators in Africa. Freedom House monitors the development. The statistics have been wonderful for so many years. And after the growth of democracy, after the fall of communism, after we've had hope, after we were led to believe that democracy is the best order and it will spread all over the world, well, all that ended. The development is logical. For the past 12 years, the Freedom House claims that the level of democracy drops and very many countries fall below the level of standard democracy, and we witness a dramatic change. The change is the biggest one in 200 years. The world from the second half of the 19th century has been dominated by the Euro-American powers. It has been unjust, unfair. The big powers did dictate their conditions to major part of the world. They were taking decisions from the position of power. And now the world is becoming multipolar. We are losing the Euro-Atlantic or Euro-American dominance. From the point of view of theoretical justice, it is, of course, more just, because we can see that the world is less foreseeable than in the past. Who would have guessed that Russia would be engaged in the war in Syria? Who would have guessed about the development in the Southeast Asia? These changes are beyond our imagination, world will become less safe for individuals who will be critical towards their governments, regimes, authoritarian regimes, or dictators. The multipolar world will also include a large portion of insecurity. That is, the basic fundamental human rights according to the UN. Are they applied on everyone? We hesitate a lot. And do all the developed countries fight for universal concept of human rights? The intergovernmental, intercontinental, international balance, equilibrium, and multipolarism may bring in more chaos and insecurity. What's going to happen if I try something in my own country? We don't know. Democratic world has lost its chance in the past decade. We were to pursue democracy much better. We were to condition our support to the underdeveloped parts of the world by democracy. We compete with China today, and China provides support without any conditions. It's like Africa in the past, which was a battlefield for the US and for Moscow. So now Asia becomes a battlefield between or among Europe, US, and Moscow. And China seems to be more acceptable because they only offer funding, money. They don't question the rules, the human rights, democracy. We have lost our time, and we failed to build a stronger position for Europe in Asia or Africa. Globalization has brought a lot of good. Communication, international advocacy of human rights, development. It has helped a lot of countries of the world, but it has also brought a lot of bad developments. Last 5 years, the authoritarian regimes and dictators inspire each other. Putin and Sisi keep visiting each other. And majority of these regimes have debated their legislation governing the human rights and NGOs' activities and financing of NGOs' activities from abroad. In a way, I'm led to believe that a common denominator for authoritarians and dictators' fear and for their efforts to limit the room for civil society is the reason is their concern, the fear. They seem to be stabilized, unshakable, but they are concerned. We can see fear. Let's have a look at the past 20 years. Countries that looked strong enough, countries where the elite ruled local world, police, management. They also had international support. These governments surprisingly broke down in few weeks or months. I'm talking about Arab Spring, for instance. This is the latter development, and the argument of those who are against a free and natural and authentic expression of people against the dictatorship are asking the absurd question because it's natural for people to raise and try to defeat those who only rule for themselves and for small groups who control the country. This is a consequence, in my opinion, not a root cause. Libya. Gaddafi has removed all elites. And now there's nobody who would be able to rule the country. The country is divided. There are very many arms. The militias and various groups, anti-Gaddafi groups, are armed and divided. But let me come back to the world development. I am convinced that authoritarians are scared of civil society, activists, social networks, international justice. That's why they reduce people's activities. Now I'm talking about Russia, about Egypt, where people want more transparency, truth, and fundamental human rights. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail. But the developed world, and we are a part of the developed world, which has been a lighthouse for the development. My colleagues from the civil society, intellectual scientists, journalists, that follow the developed world, the lighthouse. And now I can tell that the developed world is also puzzled. We have lost the direction. We have lost the self-assurance. We are no longer convinced that we know what we do and why we do it. Disinformation plays a major role, as well as propaganda and manipulation and a kind of information sprawl or a mess. In particular, in those countries where people are not educated and where people don't have a critical insight, there the governments use the achievements of globalization, like internet, to relativize the meaningful development, this lighthouse that we were aiming at. And it's interesting enough that the countries with a shorter or no track record in civil education, critical thinking. I'm talking about countries of former Soviet Union and to an extent countries of Central Europe. I mean, in these countries, we are badly impacted by propaganda, and we are no longer sure what's the truth. Unlike in the countries with an uninterrupted democratic tradition. What's going on? We are kind of puzzled. Why is this change? The change is not fast, but it's here. The future will bring in the competition between the US and China, and Europe and some other regions will, of course, be important. We will remain centers of information and power, but we will not be the main powers, and we are scared of the future. The speed, the fluid environment, the fact that nothing can be taken for granted. Speed is increasing, communication is increasing, and message today means 10 seconds only. When we respond to developments, we have no time to think about it. It's more of an emotional response that we provide. I mean, this all leads to the feeling that our lives are no longer under our control. We feel anxiety. If we want to mobilize for strong leaders, if we want to invite a strong reaction against the opposition leaders within the country or outside the country, to mobilize based on violence, aggression is always more difficult than mobilization based on fear. Fear is a strong emotion, and people who have fear tend to enter the path of the evil. Yugoslavia 25 years ago is a good example. People used to attack the other ethnics. People did murder each other. They tried to extinct the other ethnic groups. And the motive for that was, can you remember what happened during the Second World War, what happened after the war? Do you remember? Let's mobilize, let's prevent it. And then you only lit a fire and you get an explosion. In Yugoslavia, it was war and murders. In some other countries, it may be polarization, hate speech, etc. But it's the same model. You mobilize the evil using fear. And fear stems from our insecurity. World is too fast and too unpredictable. This is anxiety. And if you want to calm down in such environment, you want to land in an emotion.
We here in Central Europe have the disadvantage of not having politicians who offer a positive vision. The negative politicians are also present in France, in the UK, in the Netherlands, and so on. There are also politicians who come with a strong political positive vision. We have politicians who use fear, negation, and offer the strong hand, saying that this is what will help us, the hand of a strong manager. They are very often vulgar or even rude and say that this is something that will help us in the future. And this is very dangerous, because then it leads to situations such as the majority or major victory of Viktor Orban in Hungary and similar situations. It would be great if us, the liberal intellectuals, would also come up with simple recipes for the future. But it is not simple to come up with simple recipes, because liberal democracy is slow. It is based on in-depth discussion, reflections, repetition of the fundamental issues, while the other fast solutions are not grounded on these values. And somebody who offers to the population the vision that there will be someone who will guide them, who will give them the feeling of certainty they used to have, that it will be back the old good United States or the old good Britain. This is the communication used by Trump, by Brexit advocates. In other words, it is the arguments that are used by those politicians and also by the politicians we have here in Central and Eastern Europe. What to do to get rid of this fear that leads us towards the evil? If you look at the social networks, you will notice that media have also their part of responsibility, because they let these campaigns of hatred present on the networks instead of intervening in the discussion. And we also see that all these arguments and discussions are based on fear, on an anxiety, on emotional reactions. It is not a deep evil that we used to see in the past. It is something that was initiated by the politicians who succumbed to the fear of the population, and they point out to the fact that in different parts of the world there are problems, in Russia, in Cuba, but there are also people who are independent journalists. Here in the Czech Republic, we also had businessmen, scientists, the Roma people, migrants, non-profit organizations who are labeled as those who are the origin of our problems, instead of saying, I am to blame because I was not able to manage this country in the appropriate way. It is also to the economic transformation, it is also due to globalization that we feel these fears. And these fears are shared by many of those who are lost in these global processes. What to do? I think that despite all the acceleration, despite all the IT systems, despite the change in communication, despite the change in context, the fundamentals are still the same. It is necessary to go back to the fundamentals, and Václav Havel insisted on the fundamentals. Whatever happens in the world, whatever we communicate, whatever the world looks like, maybe the old times here for the young students who live in the 21st century sound like something from the past, something that is not more relevant. It is mutual help, kindness, generosity, and courage. These are the fundamentals that should be used by us as the guidelines and are used as guidelines by those who risk their health and health. These who are brave to defend the fundamentals do it for these fundamental values. We in Central Europe have sometimes the feeling that we are not doing as well as we should, which is right, but we tend to forget that these are the things on which we should rely, and we forget that we can use these values to face the fears, the evil that spreads in the world. And it is understandable, because if you are scared, you cannot be rational. I believe that the only thing we can do is to work patiently, gradually. We have to repeat the values. We have keep explaining these values, and that is applicable not only to here, this region, to Russia, to Cuba, to Venezuela. And we also have to support and encourage those people who have the courage to face the evil, because they have the same courage as our dissidents under the communist regime in Czechoslovakia, Poland, in other countries. So nothing has changed, basically. We simply have to accept the fact that there is a change in the world, that there is different communication, marketing, that there is speed, everything is accelerated because of IT. But otherwise, things had not changed. I do not believe that there is more evil today than in the past, that people would be worse today than in the past. But we have to face the evil. And we have here today people who face the evil and assume really risks. Today, here in the Czech Republic, we also face some risks, but we have to understand that in the world there are people who are ready to risk their lives to face the evil. And it is great to see that thanks to the Vision Foundation, thanks to Václav Havel Library, thanks to people in need, thanks to the Radio Liberty and Radio Free Europe, we are able to see the evil, and we are also able to provide support to human rights and the defenders of human rights. And if there is anything we can be proud of after the 30 years since 1989, we failed in many areas, but here the defenders of human rights is one of the things that we should be proud of.